Today's case takes place in 1987 in Atlanta, Georgia. This is the story of Lita McClinton, a 35-year-old woman. Friday, January 16th, 1987, is a foggy and rainy day. Lita and her best friend Poppy Marable, who spent the night with her, discuss the day ahead. For Lita, it is a very important day because it marks the finalization of her divorce. She feels ready to start a new chapter in her life, which, unfortunately, she will never get to begin. Shortly after 8 a.m., someone rings the doorbell. Lita tightens her pink silk robe and opens the door. In front of her stands a tall, disheveled man, a delivery driver with a package for Lita. He holds a bouquet of long-stemmed pink roses. What Lita doesn't know is that the delivery driver has a gun hidden among the roses. As Lita reaches for the bouquet, the man pulls out the gun and fires several shots, one of which hits her in the head. Poppy, her dear friend, hears the gunshots. Frightened, she grabs her 3-year-old daughter and hides in a closet. Meanwhile, a neighbor hears the shots and rushes to Lita's house, only to find her lying in a pool of blood on the entryway floor. She is still alive but gravely injured. Emergency services are called, and Lita is taken to the hospital, but there is nothing they can do. Lita dies from her severe injuries. News of her death spreads quickly, and friends and family are convinced that her soon-to-be ex-husband, James Sullivan, is behind the murder. At the time, however, James is living far away in Palm Beach, Florida. Lita was born on January 7, 1952, in Atlanta, and is the eldest of 3 children of Joanne and Emery McClinton. Her father, Emery, is an official with the U.S. Department of Transportation, and her mother, Joanne, is a Georgia state representative. She has a happy childhood with parents who love her deeply. She is described as a beautiful petite woman with large bright eyes and shoulder-length thick hair. From a young age, she has always had a natural talent for fashion. Her teenage years pass smoothly, and in 1975 she meets the love of her life, James, who will later become her husband. After graduating from Spelman College, she starts working in a boutique where she meets James. He's 34 years old, a divorced man with 4 children, and she is much younger, only 23. She is captivated by his charisma and is charmed by his courtship. However, Lita's parents are not very happy about their relationship. They see James as arrogant and selfish, and there is another issue: their different ethnic backgrounds. James is a white man and Lita is a black woman. At that time, interracial relationships were not widely accepted by society. Nonetheless, Lita falls deeply in love with James, and her parents eventually step aside and do not interfere with their relationship. The two marry in December 1976 and settle in Macon, Georgia. Here James runs a successful liquor factory, which he inherited from his uncle, not something he built himself. Lita works as a sales clerk in a department store. Unfortunately, some local residents do not tolerate their union, and often someone dumps trash in their yard. Eventually, the couple is forced to move due to the hostile environment. In 1983, James sells the business and they relocate to an upscale area in Palm Beach. They move into a prestigious villa right on the ocean front. They hope that an exclusive community like Palm Beach will be more tolerant and accepting of their relationship, but they do not find peace there either. James has big aspirations and wants to become an important member of society, but being married to a black woman excludes him from significant events and circles. Their marriage deteriorates and Lita becomes increasingly unhappy. James blames her for his inability to climb the social ladder. One day, Lita discovers that James is having an affair. She finds blonde hair and women's underwear in their bed. This betrayal deeply hurts her. Adding to her misery, James never gives her enough money. Lita goes to therapy and signs a post-nuptial agreement that guarantees her $2,500 a month in alimony if the marriage fails. Determined to save her marriage, she forgives James and continues therapy. However, after some time, she discovers that her husband visits prostitutes, and at that point, she decides to end their relationship. After 8 years of marriage, she leaves the house and returns to Atlanta, moving into a residence they own in the exclusive Buckhead area. She files for divorce and demands half of their $5 million estate. Since Lita was supposed to receive money from the divorce, James quickly becomes the prime suspect. However, when the investigation begins, he is quickly cleared. His alibi is solid. James was in Palm Beach that day, and witnesses claim to have seen 3 men near Lita's house, none of whom match his physical description. The police still investigate James and discover that he received a phone call from a rest area in Atlanta that morning. Investigators theorize that James hired someone to kill Lita and believe that call was a signal to let James know his wife had been killed. James undergoes several interrogations but denies any involvement in the murder. In February 1987, the police intercept a suspicious phone conversation between James and another man. During this call, James talks about Lita's murder and the ongoing investigation, mentioning that she was killed with a 9mm gun. Since that information had been released to the public, the agents suspect him even more. However, without a weapon or witnesses, there isn't enough evidence to indict him. 8 months after Lita's death, James marries Hyosuk Choi Rogers, a woman 13 years younger than him, nicknamed Suki. 3 years pass and the case finally seems to break. It's 1990 and everything starts when James is stopped by the police for a traffic violation. Later, he fails to appear in court. Instead, his wife shows up, claiming that she was the one driving the day the ticket was issued, and that the police officer must have lied. The judge doesn't believe her story and issues a search warrant for James's house. 4 guns are found in his residence and he is placed under house arrest. His wife Suki begins to distance herself from him and eventually leaves him. In November of that year, their divorce case becomes public, and during one of the hearings, Suki makes a shocking statement. She claims that James confessed to her that he had planned Lita's murder. She says James hired a hitman to kill Lita. Her statement becomes key evidence that investigators have been seeking for a long time. James, of course, denies everything, but he's charged with commissioning Lita's murder. Unfortunately, the case is dismissed by the judge for lack of evidence. Suki's testimony is not sufficient. Lita's parents are devastated by this news because they believe that justice would finally be served for their daughter's death. They were firmly convinced that James was responsible for Lita's death and had waited patiently for 7 long years. However, they do not give up. In 1994, they file a wrongful death lawsuit against James, claiming that he had hired someone to shoot and kill Lita. At this point, James, full of confidence, decides to act as his own lawyer. That strategy backfires as the jury finds him responsible and orders him to compensate the family with $4 million. James refuses to pay, claiming he does not have enough money. The McClintons do not give up and continue to seek justice for their beloved daughter. Their persistence pays off in 1998 when a tip leads Atlanta police to a man in North Carolina, Philip Anthony Harwood, nicknamed Tony. The tip comes from his girlfriend, who went to the police to report Tony, stating that she knows James paid Tony to kill Lita. Tony is arrested and confesses to receiving $25,000 from Sullivan to kill his wife. Tony agrees to testify against James. in exchange for a 20-year prison sentence. Now, there finally seems to be enough evidence to charge James Sullivan with the murder of Lita McClinton. However, James was nowhere to be found. At that time, he had settled in Costa Rica, but once he learned that the hitman was cooperating with authorities, he fled. The FBI placed him on their 10 most wanted list. James was spotted in Venezuela and Panama. After 4 years, thanks to the TV show America's Most Wanted, he was found. A tip led authorities to Thailand, where James was living in a beachfront house. In 2004, he was extradited to the United States. On February 27, 2006, nearly 20 years after Lita's death, the trial against James Sullivan began. Among the various testimonies against James was Lita's divorce attorney, who said that James did not want to give his wife any money and that the date of her murder, January 16, 1987, was significant. As mentioned earlier, that was the day of their divorce hearing, when the judge would decide whether Lita would receive $250,000 or $1 million. With Lita's death, James wouldn't have to pay a cent. Therefore, the prosecution argued that the motive behind the murder was money. Lita's neighbor, Bob Christensen, testified that he saw a man approach Lita's door, and after seeing photos of Tony, he was almost certain it was him. According to Bob, Tony was responsible. Tony testified that he met James in November 1986, 2 months before Lita's murder. At that time, Tony worked for a moving company and had delivered a piano to James's villa in Palm Beach. Although he stayed in the house for only 2 hours, it was enough time to plan the murder of Lita. Tony stated that James wanted Lita killed by Christmas, but they had to wait until Tony and 2 friends could go to Georgia. The first attempt to kill Lita failed before it even began, as they realized a woman probably wouldn't open the door to 3 strangers, especially early in the morning, so they devised an alternate plan. Lita would definitely open the door for a delivery man with a bouquet of roses. Unfortunately, this plan succeeded. Tony's ex-girlfriend, Belinda Trahan, the woman who tipped off the police, also testified during the trial. She said that years earlier, Tony had told her about meeting James after delivering a piano to his house, and that he wanted to kill his wife so she wouldn't get anything from the divorce. Belinda never believed this story and never thought her boyfriend would actually kill a woman for hire. She also recounted that in January 1987, Tony told her he was going to Georgia, but his plan failed because Lita didn't open the door. Incredibly, it was Belinda who came up with the idea of the bouquet of flowers. Jokingly, she told Tony that a way to get a woman to open the door was to pose as a delivery man with a bouquet of flowers, and unfortunately for Lita, this plan worked. Belinda said that even after Tony confessed to killing Lita, she still didn't believe him. Only when James handed Tony an envelope full of cash in her presence did she realize they were telling the truth. Unfortunately, despite Belinda's testimony and Tony's initial confession, the evidence still seemed insufficient. There was no murder weapon and no proof that Tony had received the money, such as bank statements or any paper trail to support the claim that James had paid Tony to kill Lita. Moreover, Tony initially confessed to the murder but later changed his story. When asked if he had agreed to participate in Lita McClinton's murder, he said no, contradicting Belinda's account that James had paid him at a restaurant table. Tony claimed that he and Sullivan had exchanged money in a men's restroom. He admitted to lying to authorities in the past and giving his girlfriend a different account of who had ordered the murder, not James, but the mafia. During the trial, the defense challenged Belinda's credibility, She couldn't remember which restaurant James had met her and Tony in, nor how far it was from their home. The defense aimed to portray her as an unreliable witness. After nearly 2 weeks, the case went to a jury of 9 women and 3 men. An initial informal vote showed nearly equal division. Some jurors struggled to believe Tony and Belinda's testimonies, but found Bob's credible. Bob, Lita's neighbor, witnessed the man ringing Lita's doorbell and heard the fatal shots. Jurors also considered calls from Atlanta to James's house and a call he received from a payphone at a rest stop. They preferred more direct evidence, as most evidence was circumstantial yet sufficient for a unanimous verdict. On March 13, 2006, James Sullivan was found guilty of Lita's murder. Initially, the defense sought the death penalty for James Sullivan. No one spoke in his defense, and neither family nor friends pleaded for mercy. Ultimately, the jury showed James more compassion than he had ever shown Lita. He was sentenced to life without parole. While awaiting trial in early 2005, the prosecutor ordered the exhumation of Frank Binert's body, James's uncle, whose business James inherited and sold for a large profit. Suspicions arose that James might have killed his uncle to inherit the business. However, it was determined that he died of natural causes, clearing James of any involvement. In 2015, Lita's parents were still pursuing Sullivan's fortune, believed to be hidden in Switzerland and Liechtenstein. A Palm Beach County judge lifted the 20-year limit, allowing them to pursue their judgment, which had risen from $4 million to over $13.5 million with interest. Also in 2015, Tony Harwood made headlines again when he was one of 4 notorious Georgia criminals found with illegal cell phones in prison. On Friday, May 25, 2018, Tony was released from prison after serving 20 years for Lita's murder. James Sullivan, however, remains imprisoned for life. Did you know about this case? Have you heard of it? As always, thank you, especially if you've made it to the end of the video. I'm sending you a virtual hug, and if you'd like, follow me on my other channels. Please leave a comment below, and see you next Tuesday with a new video. And again, bye.